Hey, how's it going everybody? Welcome back to Aussie Fish Keeping. So in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at 6 of the best blackwater aquarium fish. So if you aren't already familiar with them, a blackwater aquarium is basically an aquarium with a super low pH and really tannic dark stained water. So obviously to achieve this really dark tea colored water, you do want to put in a bunch of botanicals, and there is a variety of different botanicals out there that you can get, the most common being Indian almond leaves. However, if you do want to keep a blackwater aquarium, there is only a select few species of fish that can thrive in those water parameters. So in today's video, I've picked out 6 of those fish, and we're gonna briefly go over the care and requirements that these guys need in order to thrive in your aquarium. But without any further ado, let's just jump straight into today's video. The first group of fish on our list today is actually a super unique and kind of hard to find aquarium fish. They are wild bedders. So your typical bedder that you find in like pet shops and aquarium stores is generally what we call a bedder splendids, and that is their scientific name. So these guys can do well in a blackwater aquarium setup, but for today we're just going to be talking about the wild bedder variants that are a lot less line bred, and they have a little bit duller colors, but nonetheless they definitely are beautiful fish, and they do make a great addition into a blackwater aquarium. So there is hundreds and hundreds of different species of wild bedder out there, and there's only really a few sellers here in Australia that you can get them from. So I have my own pair of wild bedders in my fish room. I actually have bedder Kratios or Kratios. I don't know how you say it, but I will leave the name down below. So I've found these guys really easy to look after. They don't really require any major water conditions or like really hard to achieve water conditions at all. And I am keeping mine in a clean water setup at the moment, but eventually I do want to transition them to a blackwater setup and see if I can get some breeding going on. So obviously I have the bedder Kratios or Kratios, whatever it's called. But like I said before, there's hundreds of other variants out there, and a super cool variant that I'd like to get my hands on soon is bedder macrostoma. So these guys are a really large bedder species, and they are one of the mouth brooding bedder species that you can get in the hobby. Now, in saying that, actually a lot of the wild bedders are mouth brooders, and they aren't bubble nest layers like just your average bedder fish or fighting fish. So as for water parameters for these guys, it's generally going to depend on what species you get, but for the most part, most wild bedders can withstand really low pH. So you can keep them in anything from around 6 all the way up to 7.5, and you shouldn't have any problems with that. And I keep mine unheated, but if you want to keep yours heated, just make sure the temperature doesn't go too high, and I try and keep it between that 20 to 25 degrees Celsius. Okay, so as for the diet for these guys, you will find that they do like a little bit of a different diet in comparison to your average bedder. So I generally like to feed mine things like live mosquito larvae, live blackworms, and live daphnia, and I also try and mix up their diet with frozen foods and other dry foods. Because these fish haven't been domesticated as long as the bedder splendids, they aren't really conditioned to the foods we have in the aquarium hobby. So if you do get these fish and you notice that they aren't eating your frozen foods or dry foods, it's probably because they are wild caught, and you do want to definitely switch that out for live food quite quickly. In saying that, they can be switched over back to dry foods and frozen foods with a little bit of effort, and as long as you are slowly adding that food mixed in with their live food, they should gain a taste for it, and they will actually go for that in the future. Okay, so moving on to tank setting. So for these guys, obviously a blackwater aquarium is awesome for them. They definitely love it, and it definitely does simulate their natural environment. It's kind of hard to explain, but what I've noticed behavior-wise for these guys is that they do behave a lot differently to just your bedder splendids. So I find that these guys perch or hide in a little space in your tank, and then when you feed them, they will come out and eat, and then they'll go back to their little territory. So by providing like coconut huts or driftwood and stuff that they can perch on and hide in, they will definitely appreciate that, and it will make them feel a lot more safe in your aquarium. Another thing you do want to remember is that these guys are very weak swimmers, and they prefer to just like rest all day. So you don't want any high flow in your aquarium, and it's best to keep it to a sponge filter or minimal flow at that. As for tank mates, anything that can withstand the blackwater setup, I'm not going to say like any in particular right now, just because it might ruin the rest that we have in store for the video. But you could imagine just anything that's really peaceful. These guys themselves are very peaceful fish, so any small fish that is very peaceful, that can also withstand those blackwater conditions, will definitely make a great tank mate for them. But with that being said, wild betters are a great addition into your blackwater aquarium. Moving on to the next fish on our list, we have a very common fish in the aquarium hobby. We have tetras. So all sorts of tetras can go well in a blackwater aquarium. Ones I would recommend are things like serpate tetras, cardinal tetras, diamond tetras, neon tetras, all sorts of species that are naturally occurring in blackwater ecosystems. So tetras, much like the wild betters, come in a variety of different colors, shapes, sizes, bunch of different species out there, and most of which, like I said before, are compatible with a blackwater setup. So these guys are very hardy, and as for the water parameters, a pH of around 6 all the way up to 7.5 will be fine for them. They can deal with quite large fluctuations in the water, but they do prefer slightly acidic and lower pH. And as for the heating of these guys, you do want to keep it at around 20 to 26 degrees Celsius. So as for tank setting, they do like it much different than the wild betters. So these guys actually like a lot of swim space, and they don't really need too much hiding space at all. But if you can provide them with some sort of like really thin sticked driftwood, or like thin driftwood in general, you can also go ahead and add in blackwater compatible plants. So I think crypts go really well in blackwater setups, and I think you could probably get away with using Alodia in there. And then another thing you want to add into their setup is a sponge filter. So this sponge filter will act as a breeding ground for all sorts of microorganisms, and the tetras can actually eat off this depending on how big they are. Obviously really large tetras like black widow tetras aren't going to eat off that at all, but things like neon tetras, cardinal tetras, and maculata tetras should graze off those microorganisms. So I would highly recommend adding in a sponge filter. So the diet for these guys, they do like live foods as well. So things like live baby brine shrimp, live blackworms, live daphnia, live mosquito larvae, they can pretty much eat it all. And they will definitely go for dry foods and frozen foods if you have access to those as well. As for tank mates, they are obviously very peaceful. Tetras are one of the most universally community friendly fish. So they can go with all sorts of other blackwater compatible species, including the wild betters. And if you are keeping a smaller variant of tetras, you may be able to keep them with some sorts of shrimps. But with that being said, tetras as a whole do make great additions into any blackwater setup. Moving on to the next fish on our list, we have a beautiful group of American cichlids. We have apistogrammas. So apistogrammas, or cockatoo cichlids, are a absolutely amazing group of fish that you can keep in a blackwater setup. So these guys are best kept in pairs, so a male and a female. And by keeping them in a pair like that, you will find they do color up a lot better, and there will be all sorts of breeding behaviors and really cool behaviors going on in your aquarium. So the great thing about apistogrammas is that they are actually a really nice community-friendly cichlid. You can keep these guys in a community blackwater aquarium if that's something you're after. Another great thing about these guys is they don't get too large at all, and you can comfortably fit them in anything from around 30 liters and up. As for water parameters for these guys, you're going to want a pH of around 6.5 to 7.5, and you're going to want a temperature of around 22 to 26 degrees Celsius. So this is a fish that you're definitely going to want to keep a heater with. I've tried keeping them without a heater in the past, and they just haven't done as well as they do with a heater. So I would just recommend saving a lot of time and money and just keeping them with a heater in the first place. As for diet for these guys, they really love live foods in their diet, and in particular live blackworms. So feeding them live blackworms regularly, maybe like twice a week, is going to condition the female up, and you will notice some breeding if you do provide them with a breeding cave. But they can also go after dry foods and frozen foods if you want to feed them that instead. As for tank setting, you're going to want a low flow tank and a coconut hut. So like I mentioned before, if you add a breeding cave or coconut hut, you will find that the female occupies this, and they will breed in there, and she will raise up the fry. So you can either choose to take the fry out or keep them in there. It really just depends what you want to do, but it is just nonetheless a really great experience to have. As for keeping them in a low flow aquarium, they are not very strong swimmers, and they are quite bottom dwelling, so that's why you don't want any fast flow over them, just because it will stress them out a little bit. And then as for tank mates for these guys, all sorts of other blackwater compatible species, obviously. So Tetras, all sorts of Coridor Catfish, Cichlids catfish, things like that. Just anything that's not too aggressive. These guys themselves can be a little bit aggressive, so you don't want anything else in there that's too aggressive, but you also don't want anything in there that's too fragile. But with that being said, apistogrammas are a great blackwater cichlid that you can keep in your blackwater aquarium. Moving on to the next fish on our list, we have another South American cichlid. We have the Bolivian Ram. So Bolivian Rams, I believe, are a type of microgeophagus, and they are an absolutely beautiful American cichlid. So because these guys have a lot of oranges, pinks, and yellows on them, these colors really get accentuated by the darker color water. So they are a great fish to add in your blackwater aquarium. As well as that, they are very peaceful, and they can actually be kept solo, so you can just have one in there by itself and it shouldn't stress out too much at all. But as for water parameters for these guys, anything from around 6.5 to 7.5 on the pH scale is best. And then as for temperature, 20 to 25 degrees Celsius should be good for these guys. Diet, much like the apistogrammas, live blackworms are a great staple in their diet, but you can obviously feed them things like frozen foods and dry foods, and also other live foods as well. And then tank setting, again, not too high flow, and it's always great to add a coconut hut in there as well, because they are a bottom dwelling American cichlid, so they do love to brood in those sorts of conditions. And then tank mates, again, really peaceful fish, so tetras, barbs, catfish, just other peaceful fish like that. These guys are a lot more peaceful than the apistogrammas, so you shouldn't have too much trouble with them attacking other fish. But once again, you don't want to keep them with anything too fragile. So yeah, with that being said, the Bolivian Ram is a great addition into any blackwater aquarium, and I would highly recommend it. Moving on to the next fish on our list, we have another cichlid, and this might surprise a few people. We have angelfish. So angelfish aren't notoriously kept in blackwater setups, but I think they should be kept in blackwater setups more often. They are very beautiful when kept in a blackwater setup. So I have no experience with keeping these guys in a blackwater aquarium. I do keep them in a clean water aquarium, and I have really good success with them in there. But I would definitely love to experiment with them in a blackwater aquarium, just because I think it would make their colors pop like a lot. The only thing is with keeping these guys in a blackwater aquarium is that you're gonna need like a kind of larger size blackwater aquarium, so that can be a little bit more difficult to maintain and keep the water parameters stable. But if you are looking for a challenge, that would definitely be something that would be fun to do as a little project. As for water parameters, a pH of around 6 to 7.5 is best, and then a temperature of around 22 to 24 degrees Celsius. Again, much like the other cichlids on this list, they love blackworms, and they will also go for dry foods and frozen foods. As for tank setting, it's great to keep these guys with large-leaved or broad-leaved plants like swords or java fern. So not only will they breed on this, but it does make them feel a lot more safer, because they do like those like taller plants. Just because they are a taller fish themselves, those taller plants can disguise them a little bit, and if they are feeling stressed, they will go ahead and hide in those. But if you do have a blackwater aquarium and you have some vertically facing sticks, that will also give the same effect, and they will definitely appreciate that as well. As for tank mates, they can be a little bit more aggressive, and because they have those really long trailing fins or bottom fins, you don't want anything that's going to nip at them, so nothing like denios or barbs, but you could get away with tetras, catfish, and other fish like that. But with that being said, the angelfish is another great blackwater aquarium fish, and I would highly recommend them. And then moving on to the final fish on our list, we have a beautiful group of fish. We have Coridor Catfish. Coridor catfish are a beautiful bottom-dwelling fish. They come in a variety of different colors, shapes, sizes, and there's hundreds of different species out there. So all of the species are compatible with a blackwater setup, and they definitely make a great addition into it. So having these guys in a tank with lots of leaf litter is just absolutely awesome. It's awesome to see them foraging through it all, and it really just does stimulate a lot of natural behaviors. As for water parameters, pH of around 6 to 7.5 is best, and then a temperature of around 20 to 24 degrees Celsius is also great to keep them at. As for diet, they do eat all sorts of sinking pellets and dry foods like that, but live blackworms are a great food source for these guys, and it will condition them into breeding as well. And then sinking frozen foods like bloodworms and blackworms are another great food source for them. As for tank setting, like I said before, having a bunch of leaf litter in there is really nice, and also having smooth surfaces that they can't cut their barbels on is also great. And then as for tank mates, any peaceful fish, you don't want any shrimp or things like that just because they will eat them, but any tetras, barbs, even apistogrammas and angelfish, they'll definitely go fine with. They're one of the most universal fish, I think, out there. But with that being said, I definitely think that Coridor Catfish, along with the 5 other fish I've talked about today, make great additions into any blackwater aquarium, and I would highly recommend them. So with that being said, that is going to bring us to the end of today's video. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope I helped you guys find a brand new blackwater aquarium fish. If you did enjoy today's video and you haven't done so already, please make sure to go down, subscribe, smash the like button, and comment your thoughts on today's video. I always love going down there and reading them all, and I try to reply back to as many as I possibly can. If you do have any questions about this video or any of my other content, make sure to shoot me a message on Instagram. I'll leave that linked in the description, and I've also got a Facebook group and Facebook page that you can go check out as well. But yeah, with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you all so much for sticking around to the end, and I'll see you all in that next video.